Supportables, the playoffs are set. Week 14 has come and by. It pushed people to the top. It broke people down emotionally. Everything in between. Everything you expect from a fantasy season. So I can go on, and you know I want to go on, but instead, let's get to our recaps first. Then I can wrap things up. When it comes to week 14, it's tricky because I know in NFL sense, the playoff run is really just getting started. And so as the fan of the sport in me, there's certain things I would talk about. For example, we keep talking about Chiefs in media and things like that and how they might technically still be mathematically in, but how Reed's kind of FU fourth down calls are a little bit ridiculous. And we could talk about analytics and how, yeah, sure, maybe it always makes sense to go on fourth down, but it does not factor in things like momentum. And I know you're not supposed to care about that, but at the same time, a fatigued defense and constantly, repeatedly going at them, that does mean something. It also means something when your defense is actually more consistent or reliable than your offense. And I don't know how well that factors out. But even now, I'm probably boring you and you're thinking, I don't care about football. I care about my fantasy team. And in week 14, that's where we're at, where it's really hard to be an NFL fan. You're kind of your own team's fan. And with that being said, I can't help but think of some of the knock-on effects. For example, if it's not a keeper league, most of them aren't, you might never draft Jalen Hurts again if you started him this week and you needed something from him. 2 turnovers in the same play is something you can't forget. And there is a significant chance that he cost people an actual playoff spot or a seeding spot this week. If you're looking at it that way, it's more of the grudges we bear and the things that we carry. Now, we already know now if you made the playoffs or didn't make the playoffs or what seed or spot you had. So it's kind of redundant to look back at week 14. Even when I started looking at some of the statistics I wanted to look at or I would normally talk about, my head is already in the playoffs and what's happening this week. And if they're going to be repeated trends and patterns and what that says about us. For example, right now you have in the past couple weeks, Josh Allen and then Seattle's defense as probably the top 2 scorers consistently amongst all mediums. But what does that mean? Shedeur Sanders, I think, was the second highest starting quarterback. You going to trust him in your playoff game? Who do you really want to be in your first round playoff game? Even now, speaking to a bunch of people, there's a handful of people that are out and are going to be consolation. There's a couple people that got the bye. So in every league, there's only a handful of people that are actually playing this week. And you might have some of the more difficult decisions to go on. Do you want to go and try and get someone off the waiver wire? Or do you want to play like Justin Jefferson, who's done nothing for you all year, but kind of was your guy in the first round? Significant questions. I think also looking ahead, there's some really interesting matchups football-wise that are going to be huge for this week. Where do you sit on the AFC East? Do you think that most valuable player means the player who has the most value to your team? If so, Josh Allen's probably your guy. Or is it the best player on right now one of the best teams? That'd be Drake May. And they're going to get after it this week, and it's going to be super entertaining. Do we care about history? You've got Goff and Stafford, and they're going to play each other again. And I mean, it's kind of like we're getting to that age, or I'm at that age, where some people's relationships have worked and some aren't. And when you have those co-parenting situations, like, are we just supposed to pretend that they didn't get traded for each other and like family swapped? And one of them won the Super Bowl or like moved on with an attractive other partner. And the other one is Goff. We just pretending he's happy with this? Is this going to be an FU game for him? Or is this going to be the Rams cementing themselves as the best offense? A lot of football questions, a lot of fantasy sports questions. Let's focus on the fantasy sports and get on to our league, though. Not to repeat a lot, but in week 14, the big performances come out, and the Raw Doggers definitely came out. We knew there'd be some logjam up top for that second bye. Huge week here. And how did it happen? They're one of the few teams, you're going to hear this a lot, that, hey, this team did okay and not many people in the top 5, or maybe one. Part of that is because 4 of our 5 tight ends in the top 5, nobody had. They were on the bench and there were they were in waiver wire. Points that could have been had. Bowers was the tight end 5, and he was the only tight end that anyone actually played in the top 5. But on top of that, you have the wide receiver 4. Watson could be a huge pickup. We got running back 1, obviously in Gibbs, not a huge shock. And then always nice when your kicker and defense can come out. It was the K2, D2. Great situation for you. On the bench, pretty much, I would say you made the majority of the right calls, so there's not much to go back here. Sure, you didn't know about Daniel Jones, although you knew that was a risk, a broken leg walking into a game. Come on now, but you still had to give him a go. It did not cost you, but just think of what could have been. On the flip side of that cold ball too well, you were predicted huge. If you look, it's actually a flip-flop here of predicteds. Unfortunately for you, you had some massive underperformances like the one I mentioned, and so it'd be a fair question. You ever going to draft Hurts again? Remember, between Hurts and Daniels, they were two of the top 4 quarterbacks at the beginning. That'll come up a little bit later on. You had some people just doing okay. Your defense is awesome. I mean, they're legitimately awesome and have been for a bit. Love was fantastic, quarterback 4. Your kicker, okay, kicker 4, but you just need a little bit more. And frankly, this one wasn't super close. Didn't cost you a lot. It's just it would have been nice to kind of make that push. Didn't really happen. Still made the playoffs. Neither one of you can be too upset here. Speaking of too upset, I know there is nothing worse than someone lamenting about their own fantasy experiences here. It's my fault. Could have had a run a little bit earlier on. Was just trying to squeak into the playoffs here. Knew I would lose on all tiebreakers. Malakoff's needed to win, and a big win it was. If you were watching the Monday Nighter, it really came down to 2 performances. We had Nico Collins versus Xavier Worthy. I knew Worthy was a boom or bust when I put him in there. Not as much as Mitchell, but we'll get that in a second. I just needed another couple catches, but I forgot Mahomes can't throw a deep ball anymore, and that one kind of stunk. Collins at least did it quickly, got it over early. The 2 40-yard receptions kind of cemented it, and that's where it was. Now, you did it this time, and you made the playoffs. Would have been a pretty big upset if you didn't, but you didn't have anyone in the top 5, just like I mentioned. Not a lot of people were really ringing that bell. Detroit may be one of the closest, or Chase Brown, but either way, it didn't really matter for you. For me, I did have the quarterback 1, as I've had all year. I just couldn't really build around him, and this is the kick in the pants. I went with my team. Now, granted, against Tennessee, I'm not going to say that was a horrible call, but it ended up being a horrible call. Had I put Houston in, I would have made it. Had I put in any other receiver pretty much that I could have put in, I would have made it. So, you know what? My fault for trusting the Jets and the Browns. Let's be honest. Not a good decision. So to you, Malakoffs, I wish you best of luck in the playoffs. Could have been nicer here, bench. You could have maybe, given someone a little bit more hope, but no, just like we say in my basketball team, no bubbles. You hold them down until they're done, and you did. You put Fourth and Conquer down into the basement level, which we'll talk more about, because remember, there are tub thumping implications. We've pretty much forgotten about every other implication we were going to do, and I'm not there to really enforce it, so we're probably going to let that one go, but the tub thumping, that will stay. Now, in terms of top 5 performances, like I said, we don't have a whole lot of them here. Fourth and Conquer, you did have Michael Wilson. Gotta love that on the tub thumping sweepstakes. He's been having great fantasy numbers despite the fact that Arizona can't win. He was the wide receiver 2. You also had the quarterback 3 in Burrow. With him coming back, that's going to be big. Darnold would have been a better play, but aside from that, you made all the right calls, and let's be honest, I probably wouldn't have made that call either. I think you did all the right things. Just didn't happen for you. On the flip side, bench, coming in, you get a rested week. You get to rest your crew. You don't want to rest Barkley. He's actually starting to play okay. He was the running back 4. Aside from that, you just want to make sure you can recover. You've earned your bye. You're in the semis. Let's see how that pans out. Speaking of could have been nice, Jax could have went aside and made sure that Team Kickass got that bye, but no, she's going to fight to the bitter end. And again, none of these other performances where we can look and say not a whole lot to crack the top 5. Etienne was the running back 5. But just enough to get it through. Even gave you a underperformance from Wood and a 0 from Baltimore's defense. But a 0 is still better than a negative. Yowza, you're going to have some decisions to make for next week. Of course, you still got JSN, who was the running or wide receiver 5, so you got to be pretty happy with that. Aside from that, you're going to have, like I said, a few decisions to make heading into next week. You did have some buys, so I think you're going to be just fine. And Jackie, you got some injuries, but you are looking a little bit okay. You don't want to be the first 2-time tub thumper, and 2 of the 4 people in it are running risk of that. Speaking of that other group that's of risk of that, I think Norcan, I think you guys did it last year. This year, you're still in the bottom 4, so you're still in the sweepstakes. Pamela, huge win, 5th seed, made the playoffs. Paka Nakua seems to be your person, right? And it was the wide receiver 1 performance, and that was good enough to get you through. The only top 5 on the flip side of that coin was Stafford, who was the quarterback 5, and Jackson actually looked like he was better. I mean, I wouldn't say back to Jackson form, but At least he's hitting predicteds. You got to feel pretty good about that one. Taking a look at the bench, there was a lot of buys this week. This matchup was, if I'm going to be talking about Jerry Jeudy as a potential option, we're at the bottom of the bin. So the long and the short of it is, as we go to look at next week, Pamela, you got to be pumped. You're still in the hunt. Norcan, a week to rest, and then you really want to avoid double tub thumping. Just a quick word, if you didn't see it, this is our current playoff picture. Now, if you're confused as to why everyone has a bye, they want everyone to finish on the same week, just like every year. So there's only 2 matchups we're going to take a look at. Everybody else is on that bye. Now, remember on the consolation bracket, you do want to pay attention. If you win this or next week, we'll talk a little bit more about that on the other wrap-up video, but there is a vested interest not to ditch everybody. Top 2, you've earned your buys, but let's take a look at the only 2 matchups that's going to decide who's in the top 4. 3 versus 6 brings us what I think is a repeat matchup of 2 years ago's final. Malakoff, you've made a couple finals. Kikash, you are an inaugural champion, but only one of you will go on to the semis, and let's see who it is. Now, rare that a 6 would be favored over a 3. I think that has a little bit more to do with injuries and matchups. If we're looking at our 3 seed, quarterback light, you got Caleb and nobody else. Right now, you're dealing with some quarterback injuries. I mean, you probably don't really trust Taylor anymore after the negativo. Geno Smith, maybe it's a blessing in disguise that he's out. I'm pretty sure his backup would still be in, and I'm pretty sure there's a couple people on the wire if you want to take a run. Right now, you're going with Montgomery over that. You do have your San Francisco run back, and as of right now, they're supposed to be healthy, so you got to be feeling pretty good about that. And let's see how much Jamar Chase can ring up against Baltimore, since they have not been phenomenal. So I think for you, you're hoping for some wide receiver explosion. On the flip side of the coin, our 6 seed who's slightly favored, you got to be feeling pretty good. You got your 2 quarterbacks on the go. And like I said, you got that revenge matchup of Goff, who's probably trying to show his ex that he's still worth it. But you got Jonathan Taylor, and we're going to talk a little more about Seattle's defense next round, or not next round, next matchup. But you can't be loving the fact that Seattle pretty much knows that he's the only one to get it. Is he really the best offensive player this year? We're about to see in this week. He was a huge pickup for you this year, but let's see if he pays off. You do have some options. I don't know what people are going to decide on by the end. Either way, I would not be shocked if this one came down to a couple starts, a couple choices, and a couple points. Now, me doing this after Thursday means we already know that Hot Atlanta has gone off in the dirty South. So what an appropriate name and an appropriate time for Kirk Cousins to come through. Now, the Bijan explosion we kind of expected, but the Kirk Cousins, that is gutsy, Pamela. You went with your name. You got who might be the number 1 receiver again. I expect Rams in Detroit to be an offensive powder keg. Now, you do have an injury you haven't addressed here. My guess is you will. I'm not trying to influence anyone from doing anything. I would never talk someone into playing someone or not. But in this particular case, I'm assuming you're going to take someone who's playing over someone who's not. Now, you already made your kicker decision, and I know sometimes that's gone back and forth. You also do have a tough defensive matchup, so some decisions to be made there. On the flip side of the coin, you are trusting Hurts again. Ball too well. You are a very trusting group of people. You got to hope for a bounce-back performance. You also got to hope for some wide receiver help. And then you definitely got to hope. This is your kicker. There is 0% chance that Seattle gets 7 points. They are playing an old... You're playing a grandfather. Phillip Rivers has like 10 kids, and I'm pretty sure he's an expected grandfather. And he hasn't played in a while. And he's going against the best defense in the NFL. This is either a Netflix movie in the making where Rivers puts up a phenomenal performance, or we actually see someone have a stroke on the field. And I'm not trying to make fun of illnesses. You got to watch this game just for that alone. That might end up being, Seattle has been your leading scorer the last couple weeks because he's not Josh Allen. And that's the only one, like I said in the intro, that they haven't outscored. This one could be exciting. You know, it's funny. Heading into week 15, you think it's epic and fireworks. We just had the end of the regular season. But there's always this letdown. Of the 10 teams in the league, only 4 are playing this week. Now, those 4 are really into it because making the semis means you're going to make a money round because at third place, it's value here. We know our number 1 seed, but we already knew that one already. So this week, it's more about posturing for position. So we're going to be paying attention to the quarterfinal, the only 4 teams that are going. It'll be interesting to see which 2 teams come up top, but everyone's going to have to pay attention a little bit more in week 16. If you are unsure of the rules of the bottom 4, I can cement them more next week, but just remember the season is not done. You don't get anything for winning that 7th place consolation final other than pride, but you do get something if you finish last. Wah wah. Anywho, best of luck, especially to our 4 teams playing next week.